Hey guys, welcome back to this video where I'm going to be doing another Senate prediction map. It's been a while since my last one. I have a little change and we're getting kind of towards the end of primary season right now, so we have a lot more information to go off of. Going to go through every single Senate race here. As you can see, only 23 Democrats aren't up for election compared to 42 Republicans. So 2018 was obviously going to be a tough year for Democrats to try to defend their seats in the Senate. A lot of these seats being states where Trump was able to beat Hillary Clinton, but actually, it's a better situation for the Democrats, the fact that Trump is the president and the fact that the Republicans control the Senate and the House of Representatives, because that's only going to increase enthusiasm and voter turnout on the Democrat side, kind of like what we saw in 2010, where that enthusiasm was on the Republican side as they had a surge wave of Republican voters that went and made a big difference. I see that playing on the opposite side here in 2018 for the Democrats. So what I'm going to do in this video is just go over every single Senate race and either list it as solid Democrat, likely Democrat, lean Democrat, toss-up, and then lean Republican, likely Republican, or solid Republican. And then at the end, going to go through all of the toss-up results and give a lean either to the Democrats or the Republicans based on how I see things playing out. And then I can see, after we get the election results, how either accurate or inaccurate I was. So starting off here, I'm going to go from east to west and kind of just work my way around. So in Maine, incumbent Angus King, very popular there. Incumbent who caucuses with the Democrats, going to be a safe seat for them there. And then also likewise in the state of Vermont with Bernie Sanders, he's going to run away with that one. New York, incumbent Krysten Gillibrand, very safe win for the Democrats there. Massachusetts with Elizabeth Warren, incumbent, going to win that one and be safe for the Democrats. Rhode Island, another incumbent situation with Sheldon Whitehouse, going to be safe for the Democrats. Chris Murphy, incumbent in Connecticut, going to be safe for the Democrats. New Jersey, I'm going to put one step below being safe and put it at likely Democratic because Bob Menendez, the incumbent there, isn't as favorable as the prior Democrats that I was just discussing. Probably going to be a bit more competitive in that race than these other races that I've already touched on. So just one step below. Still likely that the Democrats contain this or retain this incumbency here with Bob Menendez, but still going to be a little bit tougher than those other races. Now moving on to Delaware, and Tom Carper is the incumbent. We're actually getting this primary tomorrow. I wouldn't be completely shocked if Carrie Evelyn Harris was able to unseat Carper and run as the Democrat going towards the general election. Either way, I see this as being safe for the Democrats in what's a very Democratic state there in Delaware. And then also Maryland, the incumbent Ben Cardin is likely to run away with this one as well. So now moving on over to Pennsylvania, Bob Casey, the incumbent. Every single poll that we've been getting here has had Bob Casey in a very comfortable situation. He's usually over double digits ahead of his counterpart. Going to put this one step below being safe for the Democrats. And this is going to continue to be the case here throughout a lot of these Midwestern states. So Ohio with Sherrod Brown, the incumbent. Michigan, Debbie Stabenow, the incumbent. Wisconsin, Tammy Baldwin, the incumbent. Three states that Trump was able to win over Hillary Clinton. The Democrats have the incumbency advantage in these ones, which is a big help. And also basically every poll that we've seen for all of these different races has the Democrats in pretty good shape. So listing all of these as likely for the Democrats. Also in Michigan, Debbie Stabenow going against John James. I feel like that makes things a little bit easier for her than if she would have gone against Sandy Pensler, who's a bit more moderate than John James, but James going on and winning the Republican primary in the state of Michigan probably makes things a little bit easier there for Stabenow. And then Tammy Baldwin, based on the polling that we were seeing, she actually wasn't doing quite as well against the other Republican primary opponent that ran against Leah Vukmir. Vukmir going on and winning this one at the end of the day. Maybe those polls were a little bit inaccurate, but based on just the polls that we saw, Tammy Baldwin did better against Leah Vukmir than the other Republican that was running in that primary. So maybe this makes things a little bit easier for her. We'll see how that plays out. But again, another situation where it's a likely Democratic seat there. Now moving up to the state of Minnesota, which saw just tremendous turnout in their primary on the Democrat side compared to the Republican side. Incumbent Amy Klobuchar likely to run away with that one. And then also the special election in Minnesota, maybe one step below being a safe Democratic seat there. You don't have the incumbency advantage that Al Franken would have had before his dismissal and then being replaced by Tina Smith, who's now going to be running for this one against Karen Housley. We'll see how that one plays out, but again, a likely scenario for the Democrats to keep that one. Now moving back here to the state of Virginia, Tim Kaine, the incumbent. This is likely a very safe Democratic seat, not just because it's Tim Kaine, the incumbent, the fact that he was the vice presidential candidate in 2016, but he's going against Corey Stewart, who's one of those fringe Republican guys that his rhetoric is not going to sit well with a lot of moderate independent voters, for instance, and even maybe more moderate Republican voters as well. I think that makes things a lot tougher for the Republicans in the state of Virginia, having a guy like Corey Stewart on the ticket in comparison to somebody else that might have been a bit more moderate in that scenario. Again, Tim Kaine was already going to have a big advantage, but going against somebody like Corey Stewart probably only makes things that much more manageable for him. Moving on to West Virginia, Joe Manchin, incumbency advantage again. Going against Patrick Morrisey on the Republican side in the primary, Joe Manchin absolutely blew it out of the water in terms of the votes he got compared to any other candidate. And just in terms of his favorability in West Virginia, it's pretty high. And West Virginia, it's one of those weird states. They have a ton of registered Democratic voters, but a lot of those people voted for Donald Trump, for instance, but likely to come home to the party with a guy like Joe Manchin, who they feel comfortable with. Even though many felt like West Virginia was going to be a tough state for the Democrats, based on the polling that we've been getting, it looks fairly safe for Joe Manchin, also in a year where it expected to get quite a bit more turnout on the Democrat side than you would typically get in a midterm year. That probably puts this one as a likely Democratic situation. All right, so now we're going to start moving over into some states that are really close. Indiana, toss-up scenario. We'll get back to the ones that are toss-up at the end of the video. Tennessee, toss-up. Florida, toss-up. Missouri, toss-up. Going down to Mississippi, incumbency advantage there with Roger Wicker. He's looking really safe, obviously, in a very Republican state like Mississippi. And then the special election scenario, Cindy Hyde-Smith going against Mike Epstein. Probably going to be a bit more competitive. Going to put that one as a likely Republican, kind of similar to the situation that we're having up here in Minnesota with their special election being one step lower than a lock with the other incumbent that's also running in that situation. Moving on, like I said, Missouri, toss-up. Texas toss-up, especially based on the polls that we've been getting recently, has pretty much consistently been right around the margin of error or closer, so leaving that one till the end of the video. Nebraska, maybe slightly competitive, but instead of being an absolute lock for the Republicans, probably one step down. A likely Republican scenario there with the incumbent Deb Fischer. Wyoming, that's going to be safe Republicans, incumbent John Barrasso. And then also Utah is going to be safe for the Republicans with Mitt Romney. Moving up, North Dakota, that's a toss-up scenario. I'll get back to that one. And then Montana, it's another situation here where Trump did very well in this state, but the Democrats have the incumbency advantage with a senator that has pretty good favorable numbers, kind of similar almost to West Virginia, maybe one step lower than I'd put West Virginia. We're going to put that as a lean for John Tester at this point against the state auditor, Matt Rosendale, who's challenging on the Republican side. But again, the polling has been pretty positive for Tester overall. He has a favorable rating. That's pretty positive, as well as his incumbency advantage gives him the lean there. Moving on to Washington, going to be a solid Democrat seat there with incumbent Maria Cantwell. Same with California with Dianne Feinstein. Either way, even if Feinstein doesn't win, you have Kevin De Leon there, who's also a Democrat. So you have two Democrats running for that Senate seat. And then moving down to Hawaii, another incumbency advantage in one of the most liberal states in the country in Hawaii. Going to be keeping that one with Mazie Hirono. And then we get Nevada and Arizona, which are also in that toss-up category. But then New Mexico, safe, likely for the Democrats here with incumbent Martin Heinrich. So that puts us at a situation where we're at 45 for the Democrats, 47 for the Republicans, and the final 8 seats are right around that toss-up range on both sides, where it could really go either way. It kind of depends on how things shape up here over the last 2 months before we get to those midterms. But I'm just going to go through and give where I think these particular races are leaning at this point. So I'm going to start out in Nevada. The primary results there, Jacky Rosen was able to get more votes than the incumbent Dean Heller got, so already a positive for the Democrats there. Also a state that Hillary Clinton was able to beat Donald Trump in. Dean Heller has the incumbency advantage, but Jacky Rosen, she's a U.S. representative from Nevada's 3rd District, so she has at least some name recognition. And at this point, based on the polls and what we saw in the primaries, going to give this one as a lean to the Democrats in the state of Nevada. Moving down to Arizona with Martha McSally going against Krysten Sinema. Arizona, they dodged a bullet there on the Republican side with Ward and Arpaio coming up short against McSally. McSally was their best chance at potentially getting this one for the Republicans. If it was Jeff Flake, I would probably give the Republicans the lean, having that incumbency advantage, but Krysten Sinema has consistently been ahead in the polls, and even in Arizona, which tends to be a bit leaning to the red side, it has changing demographics, becoming a little bit more of a purple state. It was competitive between Clinton and Trump, but Krysten Sinema definitely getting the lean at this point. Now moving up to North Dakota, Heidi Heitkamp, the incumbent, going against Kevin Cramer. If Heitkamp didn't have that incumbency label on her, I would have already put this one down for the Republicans. She has won statewide election there, obviously, last time around, and going against Kevin Cramer here, he is the U.S. representative at large from North Dakota, so obviously winning statewide election there to be the member of the House of Representatives for their one district, that at-large district, so showing that he can do well across a statewide election. A state that leans to the Republicans, clearly, I'd see this one as being a really tough one for the Democrats to hold on to. Going to give the lean to Cramer at this point. Also, based on the polling, probably giving the lean to Cramer as well based on those numbers that we've been seeing in that race. Now moving down, we're going to start getting into some ones that are really tough to judge. So Missouri, we have the incumbent here, Claire McCaskill, the Democrats going against Missouri Attorney General Josh Hawley, who's challenging on the Republicans' side. Missouri, McCaskill has shown that she can win these statewide Senate elections. Her last time around, she got a gift going against Todd Akin. Going to be tougher this time around going against Josh Hawley. Republican-leaning state in Missouri, but obviously they've shown that they can also elect Democrats to statewide elections. We've seen that from governors there in Missouri. Also, we've seen that in the Senate races as well. And what's likely to be a big increase in turnout on the Democrats in these midterms compared to what you typically get, that helps Claire McCaskill. With that said, Josh Hawley, he's been keeping things really close in the polls. They've been even the last 2 polls that have come out. There was also a Republican poll that came out a little bit before that had Hawley ahead by just 2 points. Again, this is as razor thin as it gets, and we're going to talk about a couple more of these razor thin margins here, but I think the Democratic enthusiasm is just enough to keep Claire McCaskill's seat here in the state of Missouri. It's not going to be easy, but another thing that I see playing in the Democrats' advantage here is the fact that the Republican governor had to be dismissed there, so there might be a bad taste in the mouths of some of these Missouri Republican voters, or independent voters more specifically, in how the Republican Party had to deal with that situation. It was kind of a black eye there for the Republicans, so maybe that also helps enough for McCaskill to get over the line, but we'll see how that plays out. Moving on to Indiana, and originally I felt like this was more of a Republican lean scenario. Maybe Mike Pence could be a big factor there, campaigning for Mike Braun, but the polls that we've been getting more recently has shown really positive signs for incumbent moderate Democrat Joe Donnelly. The last poll that just came out, a very credible poll from NBC, they're ranked as one of the more accurate polls based on their historical ranges there from actual results, had Donnelly ahead by 6 points. Also, the poll before that was actually a Republican poll, and Donnelly was ahead by 12 points in that one. So not sure what happened in that particular result, but definitely more positive signs for Donnelly in those scenarios. So based on the polling information that we're getting here more recently from Indiana, got to give this at least a lean and the incumbency advantage to Donnelly is helping him as well. So again, probably going to be really close. Donnelly has proven he can win these statewide elections. A bit easier of an opponent, I think, last time for Donnelly than this time, but again, we'll see how that plays out in Indiana, giving it to a lean for Donnelly at this point. Moving down to Tennessee, Phil Bredesen, the former Tennessee governor, going against Marsha Blackburn, U.S. House of Representatives, Tennessee's 7th congressional district. And Blackburn being more on the far right end makes things a bit difficult here for the Republicans in comparison if they had the incumbency advantage. If Corker was running, for instance, I think he'd probably win this one. But having Blackburn in there, I think makes things a little bit tougher. Going against the former governor of the state, Phil Bredesen, In that election where he won as governor, he won every single county across the state. He absolutely blew things out against the Republican that he was going against. And the polling in general has favored Bredesen over Blackburn. So also taking that into consideration, giving the lean to the Democrats here in the state of Tennessee. It's not a progressive candidate, obviously, on the Democrat side, but the Democrats will take anything they can get here in the state of Tennessee, a moderate Democrat, kind of similar situation to Alabama there with Doug Jones, more in that mold of a Democratic senator. But again, based on that polling and the fact that he's going against a more further to the right wing opponent, I think that helps his cause, being more as a centrist. So again, siding with the former Tennessee governor there in Tennessee just slightly at this point in time. And now moving down to the final two states here, Florida and Texas. We have the Democrats at 50, the Republicans at 48. So I'll talk about Florida first. And originally I had this one for Bill Nelson just barely, but then Rick Scott, he was doing better in the polls. And just the fact that Bill Nelson, he's not the most enthusiastic campaigner. He's not a guy that's going to encourage enthusiasm and turnout above what you would need to get a Democrat elected in a statewide situation in Florida. Kind of rode the coattails of Obama last time around, and this time facing a much tougher challenger in Florida Governor Rick Scott. So with all that being the case, I was actually starting to lean this one more towards the Republicans and Rick Scott winning this one, but the recent polling data has had it an even split between the two sides, and what I think is going to, at the end of the day, push this over the line for the Democrats is Gillum running for governor. He's going to increase turnout dramatically amongst a large group of people that wouldn't have come out otherwise if a different candidate was on the ballot for that Democratic governorship. The Republicans were most worried about Gillum winning that Democratic primary. The Democratic Party themselves couldn't even see the situation that was going to play out if Gillum ended up winning, because they put their full support and financial resources behind the other candidates in that governor's primary. But now the fact that Gillum is on the ticket running for governor, like I said, it's going to massively increase the turnout amongst voters that aren't likely voters. And again, with these polls, a lot of it is polling based on likely voters. And Gillum was consistently in about fourth place in that matchup. He ended up about doubling his polling in terms of what actually happened, because those voters that aren't as likely to turn out and vote ended up casting a ballot for Gillum. And again, that's going to have a trickle-down effect to Bill Nelson. I think that's just enough to get him over the line as the incumbent is going to retain this seat in Florida. And it's a great situation for Bill Nelson, because otherwise it was going to be a hard win for him against Rick Scott. It's still going to be difficult, but again, that Gillum factor is going to play a big part. So now moving on to the state of Texas, which is, I think, one of the more interesting Senate races across the country here coming up. Beto O'Rourke, in the first video I made, I kind of went out on a limb and gave it to the Democrats. I felt like O'Rourke, because of Ted Cruz's bad numbers in terms of his favorability, and also the fact that O'Rourke, he didn't have the name recognition. He was already polling really close to Cruz, and the fact that he had so many months to close that gap, and that's pretty much what's been playing out. So the last four polls that we've seen, it's been Cruz ahead by 1 point, 4 points, 6 points, and 2 points respectively. So a very tight race here, and still 2 months to go until that election. But again, this is more of a pragmatic video than that first one I made, and I have to give the slight lean to Ted Cruz, but it's going to be really close. If Republicans think they can write this one off, they're going to be in a tough situation here come the midterms, because I feel like if the Republicans don't put a full effort blitz behind Ted Cruz's campaign here, getting Donald Trump in the state, doing everything he can, flooding it with the necessary advertisements to just try to increase that Republican turnout, given the enthusiasm gap between the Democrats and Republicans, they're going to need everything they can to hold on to the seat in what's going to be a very competitive matchup here. But again, I give this as a slight lean to the Republicans. But again, basically a toss-up situation almost based on the polling results, and still a ways to go. So we'll see how that plays out. So guys, at this point, this is about where I have the map. 51 for the Democrats, 49 for the Republicans, and a large handful of states that are in that toss-up category that could potentially go either way. Once we get to election results, I cannot wait to see how these races play out. see how accurate or inaccurate I was and able to compare them. So thanks for stopping on in for this video. Subscribe for more. Hope to see you guys back here for future prediction videos.